This is a fascinating and important clip of Jordan Peterson talking about Hitler, his sick, evil ideology, but understanding the roots of it and how insanely evil it was. Jordan unpacks this in a way that I think is so important for us to understand. Have a watch.
Here's what you should have done if you were a Nazi and you wanted to win the war. You should have enslaved the Jews and the Gypsies and had them work, right? You should have had them work for the benefit of the victory, and then if you wanted to, you liquidate them afterwards. That's the logical thing to do if you want to win. And we assume that Hitler wanted to win. But that's not a very intelligent assumption. Why would you assume that? He wasn't exactly a good guy. So why should we assume that he was aiming at the good that he was promoting, even in his own terms, right? The glorious, everlasting Third Reich, right? That'll rule for 1,000 years and be a bastion of civilization and music, because that's the sort of thing he purported to be interested in. Well, so what do you do with the Jews and the Gypsies? Well, round them up, fine. Enslave them, fine. You don't kill them. You certainly don't devote a substantial proportion of your war resources while you're losing to accelerate the rate at which the extermination is taking place, because that's a bit counterproductive, unless what you're aiming at is the maximum possible mayhem in the shortest period of time. Well, so what happened as the Germans started to lose the war? Did Hitler lose faith in his own ability? No, he believed that the Germans had betrayed him with weakness, and so he was perfectly willing to accelerate the rate at which Germany was losing the war. And so when Hitler and his minions had the choice, here's the choice. You can suspend your unnecessary demolition of people, win the damn war, and then pick it up afterwards. Or while you're losing, you can just accelerate the mayhem even though it's counterproductive. It's like, what'd they pick? Well, they picked to accelerate the mayhem. And so to me, there's an old psychoanalytic idea. I think this was derived by Jung. If you can't figure out what someone is doing or why, look at the outcome and infer the motivation. If it produces mayhem, perhaps it was aiming at mayhem. Now, you have to use that dictum carefully. If someone's irritating you, maybe it's because you're irritable and you should sort yourself out, but maybe it's because they're actually aiming at irritating you. And that's the actual motivation. So perhaps not, but it's another tool in your analytical armament. So, and so you see, well, and this is the thing about warfare that's so interesting about because you can attribute it to territoriality. You can attribute it to a war for resources. That's what I would say, wretchedly simple-minded economists presume. People fight over scarce resources. It's like, hey, we're a little bit more sophisticated than that. And first of all, what resources are you talking about? The bloody Inuit had nothing. They lived perfectly well. What did they have? Snow and seal blubber. People can live in unbelievably deprived conditions. And so the idea that there are natural resources that we fight over because there's a shortage of them is a pretty oversimplified view of human beings. It's like, well, why do people fight? Well, maybe they fight sometimes for good reasons, but very, very frequently they fight for bad reasons. And those bad reasons are personal as well as sociocultural and economic. If you were a Nazi prison guard, for example, whatever pathologies you were carrying around in your destructive little soul, whatever element of Cain was deeply embedded in you, had the opportunity to be manifest fully at every moment of your waking existence, right? You had these people who were completely beholden to you, with no rights whatsoever, to whom you could do whatever your evil little heart determined. You think, well, maybe that was a motivation for putting them there to begin with. And all the cover story about, well, we're trying to build the Third Reich and we're trying to stabilize the state and we're trying to do all these good things. Maybe that's just a cover story for the real motivation, which is nothing but what? The construction of death camps that killed 6 million people. How about that? And the obliteration of 120 million people on the planet, and the leaving of Europe in ruins. Maybe that was the motivation. Or are we going to attribute to Hitler the highest possible motives? Say, no, it's an archetypal manifestation of Cain. Now, he's going to put up a front that says, well, I'm your savior. It's like, well, destructive people think that Cain is their savior.
That is so interesting that he refers to Cain and Abel, and I'll explain why. I think this actually really gets to the heart of things. What he says about Hitler is absolutely right. I remember learning something that was so baffling to me, but once you understand what he's saying, makes so much sense. In the final stages of the war, 1944, Hitler had a chance to do something that could be of strategic benefit. There were train tracks on the eastern front of Germany, and when the Nazis conquered Hungary, they could choose: do they want to send the Hungarian Jews to Auschwitz on the train tracks, or use those same trains to get troops to the Eastern Front, German troops to the Eastern Front to fight? What does Hitler choose? Get the Jews, the Hungarian Jews, to Auschwitz. Again, a clear strategic error, or was it? What was he ultimately after? You know, in his final radio address in 1945, when it was clear it was all crashing down, what did he say? He said to the Germans, "I implore you to continue to uphold the racial laws to their fullest extent." It was clear that nothing mattered more to him than the eradication of the Jews. Why? So interesting that he refers to Cain and Abel. It's amazing. It's the first story where we, you know, after Adam and Eve are exiled from the Garden of Eden. It's the first time we sort of see of it's the first story we see of humanity and how imperfection starts to creep in. In some ways, we must see here the story of Cain and Abel as being like an archetypal story for us to tell us about what's at the root of mankind's strife and violence and war and bloodshed and difficulty. Cain kills Abel. Why? Because of Abel's relationship with God. God accepts Abel's offering, not Cain. Fascinating. The rabbis of the Talmud tell us that the hatred of Israel began at Mount Sinai when God chose the Jewish nation to be his nation as vessels and conduits for the divine, and to share that with the whole world. And the rabbis of the Talmud tell us that the hatred of the nations began at Mount Sinai. And they use a play on words. They say the Sinah of the nations, Sinah means hatred in Hebrew, comes from Sinai. It's like a play on words. So what they're telling us is that anti-Semitism is a resistance to that mission, whether it because of the moral accountability that it brings, which Hitler resented. He wanted a law of the jungle, Superman, Übermensch world where the weak are crushed. Whether it's a jealousy because of that divine relationship and mission. Whatever it is, the rabbis of the Talmud are telling us that is the source of this, and Cain and Abel is that archetypal story. And Hitler himself told us this, that he resented the Jews for bringing conscience to the world and for all these things that I listed that were against his ideology. So was he mad? Well, if you accept the Nazi ideology and principle, the Jews are the fundamental number one enemy. He said in a speech that France, England, America, it's all just a facade. Behind them all lies the Jew, he said. So Jordan Peterson is right to cut through all the fogginess around how we understand what was going on with Hitler. Hitler understood who the Jewish people actually are. He didn't like it, but he understood it. The question is, do we, the Jewish people, know who we really are? And do we articulate that to a world crying out for meaning and moral leadership? That is the most important question, I believe, of our times. Before we finish, I just want to share with you something really important. We are told that Israel's actions are the cause of the Israeli-Arab conflict, but we've just released a groundbreaking documentary proving that Arab Islamic Jew hatred far predates Israel's re-establishment. This is a critical fact that everyone needs to learn about. Have a watch of our trailer for our new JTV Plus documentary entitled Arab Anti-Semitism Before Israel's Re-Establishment. Picture yourself, it's 1834 and you're a Jew living in Tzfat, which is a northern city in Israel, then under the Ottoman Empire. Your family is part of this ancient city's spiritual heart for generations. You study Torah, You trade in the market and live quietly among your Arab neighbours. But one day, a mob storms your street, shouting, "Kill the Jews!" Your home is looted, your synagogue burned, your loved ones beaten. This isn't about Israel. Israel won't exist for 114 years. This isn't about settlements, the IDF, or the 1948 displacements. This is raw, violent hatred aimed at you for being a Jew. And it's not just in Palestine, it's part of a centuries-old story of anti-Semitism woven into Arab and Islamic history, from the dawn of Islam to the streets of Hebron. The claim that this conflict began with Israel's creation, the Nakba, or modern policies, is a farce, a distortion that collapses under history's magnifying glass. Welcome to JTV Plus. I'm Ollie Annisfeld, and today we're uncovering a history too often buried, the relentless anti-Semitism among Arabs in Palestine before 1948, rooted in a broader Arab and Muslim hostility that began with Islam's inception in the 7th century. To watch this JTV Plus documentary and access much more premium content, click on the link in the video description.